Hello everyone, thanks for joining us, and I'll be taking you through the Smart Insights rating framework as a way to help you do that. I'll also be giving a lot of practical tips and examples as we go through, so I hope to give you some concrete actions you can apply to your business as we go through. Just to introduce myself in a little more detail, I'm fortunate to have been involved in digital marketing since the mid-90s, believe it or not, and I've enjoyed sharing best practices and my learnings as I've worked with clients as a consultant in training workshops since then, and also in developing books such as Digital Business and E-commerce Management. Now the publishers, they would just update the books every 3 years or so. So what I wanted to do to help marketers on a more active basis is to develop a platform where effectively Smart Insights could be a virtual consultant in not just my knowledge, but knowledge from specialist experts. So for example, in the business-to-business marketing area we're going to focus on today, we have Renee Power, who's developed some resources in our B2B digital marketing toolkit. So we've worked to create those resources, and I'll be taking you through you can see on the screen there, one of our most popular resources is a planning workbook, which is actually a Word document that you can go through to very quickly develop your own strategy, and I'll be highlighting some of the tools that are available within that. We like mind tools to help you think, discuss with colleagues and agencies. So we are going to have the questions as we go through, which will be great. If you do have any future questions, I'm very happy to link up on LinkedIn, of course, and you can see that my expertise as well as strategy, I do like to get to grips with the details that matter in digital marketing. So whether it's SEO, social media, or email marketing or analytics. So we will drill down into some of these more practical topics as well. So I've taken a look at your questions that you asked when you signed up for the webinar, and that was really interesting and useful actually. I've been able to tailor the webinar, and I think a lot of people are still at a very early stage in their digital marketing and how they integrate that into their traditional marketing. So we're going to start from this position is, where should I start? And then there was also a similar question is, if I've already got a plan, where should I look to focus to get the biggest incremental benefits? So we'll look at that as well. Now this was a really interesting one. At Smart Insights, we find there's a huge hunger for people to create digital strategies, and it's a very good question. Why should we do that when we've already got a marketing strategy? And my view is that you very much should integrate digital with marketing, but before you do that, you need to run a digital transformation program which really works through the opportunity, strategy and action, as you can see on the right here. So you can get buy-in from your colleagues to explain the extent of the transformation that's needed. But in the future, when you've made that transformation, it should very much be part of business as usual, your overall marketing strategy. We had quite a few people talking about KPIs, key performance indicators, and I'll give you some examples of dashboards that I think businesses should develop to look at this integrated strategy, how well it's working. Templates, as I've said, I'll show you examples of those. Maximum bang for buck, people are asking naturally, and then some more practical questions about lead quality, and I hope to touch on that also. So to answer that question, where to start, what we believe is you need to review the current situation and really see the gap, do a gap analysis of where you are now against where you need to be. And if we take a look at this framework, you can download this from the site if you're a basic member. And in fact, we've got a benchmarking template like this for all of the individual channels as well, such as social media, SEO, customer experience, and so on. So what we would suggest you do is you score yourself on on different criteria on a scale of 1, where you're just starting out, to 5, which would represent the most advanced businesses in the world. And I'll show you some examples from some of those later in the webinar. Now, what I believe is that what you must have for success, to drive success, is you do need a strategic approach, but coupled to that, you need to be data-driven and to have an optimization process. So to start, you do need to define those key performance indicators in the dashboards, and then to move to a more advanced approach that we'll talk about later. As I mentioned at the start there, you do, I think, often need a digital transformation program where you get senior management to across the business to buy in and put in place the resourcing, because often you'll need new skills, you'll need new agencies. For the very largest companies, you may have to actually restructure. You might initially have a central digital marketing center of excellence, but then through time you'll distribute, as it says here, decentralization and reskilling. You'll have more people throughout the business in the marketing, brand, product teams who do have the digital skills needed. Having the right data and infrastructure is really important to drive success, particularly when you're capturing leads, you're assessing the quality of your audience, and then following up through marketing automation, which is what we'll touch on as well. And then finally, with F&G here, these are really the practical ways, the touch points that you have on your website and through your email and other channels. So you may need to make those fit for purpose. Of course, even in B2B, there's an increasing number focusing on mobile access, particularly for email, so you have to get that work, looking across paid, owned and earned social media. So that's really the first benchmark first takeaway is to do a benchmark, talk it through with colleagues and say, okay, at the moment we're at level 2, we need to work through so that we're at level 3. That the larger businesses only need to develop to 4 or 5. For a smaller business, level 3 may be sufficient. Now, as I mentioned there, we do have a tool available on the site for our basic members, so it's really available and expert members can record their improvement. Those are the paying members. And just to reassure you really that we do share how people score themselves, and the vast majority are at a very early stage because the transformation needed for digital marketing is so huge. So if you do think, oh my God, there's such a lot to do, you're not alone, and it's because digital is a moving target. So the second takeaway is that as well as doing that benchmarking, we recommend you develop your own framework which will allow you to focus your digital marketing activities. Now, one of our commentators actually worked through all the channels that there are, from, if you imagine, from you've got your paid and organic search, you've got your social media, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and so on. And actually there's more than 100 channels when you look at it at that granular level. So to focus, it's really essential to have some planning frameworks, and we've developed this framework we call RACE planning, based on the traditional marketing funnel. Now, I'm going to run through in this webinar each of these stages and introduce them, so I'll make this quite quick now. I think the main points are to say that you do need a focused plan and a strategy before you go into the tactics for how you reach and convert your audience. And then the second thing is you do need very clear KPIs or measures, and I've got some separate slides to talk against these later. Now, you may be thinking, okay, so yeah, I know the conversion funnel, but usually it's something like attract, convert, retain. Why is there this extra stage? Well, actually, we created this extra stage of ACT, which stands for interaction, because it's so difficult to achieve this online. Many people will bounce off your website in a matter of seconds if they don't find the right content or there's not clear customer journeys. So in a B2B marketing sense, this is about developing leads and capturing leads on the site, and then the conversion stage is working through building the relationship, maturing those leads to conversion, and then engage is the long-term customer relationship to develop customer loyalty, boost satisfaction, and then get those repeat purchases. And recommendations too, of course, that's particularly relevant with social media. So for our expert members on Smart Insights, everyone can access the top level framework, but what we wanted to do was really give a complete roadmap of all the activities you have to get right. Now, it is quite daunting, but we hope that by breaking it down, it will give businesses the focus they need. So, for example, in the interaction one, I mentioned customer journeys and lead capture. Those are two, profiling as well. Those are two key areas you need to get right, but also looking at your content marketing strategy, how you devise landing pages. Those are so important on the site. We've pulled those out as a separate activity, and then campaign planning, putting together a schedule for the next quarter or the next year. So our belief is that by drilling down into the details, that's what will make you successful. And you'll see in each of the sections later in the webinar, I'll quickly run through these other activities. Just to reassure you that this the approach we've used is it's based on, in the first instance, when I was consulting and training with colleagues of organisations, we've been running this sort of process since around 2000 when I first published my book, and it's been great adoption both by the large companies you can see here and also smaller businesses. Many of these will use the RACE planning framework, but others will adapt it and align it with their own framework. So GlaxoSmithKline, for example, they're one of our expert members, and they've taken the RACE planning framework and just recast it so it works best in that pharma type market. But we've tried to develop something that's scalable, that works across different types of brands, but works particularly well, we think, in B2B. And you can see some of our members here. This does work. We research it, and it's making a real difference to people's businesses and individually as well in their careers, we hope. So that gives you a background on our frameworks. Let's start now with a question in the poll. So we've said strategy is important, do you have a strategy is an obvious question. So we're seeing the results coming through, and that's really interesting. So the majority actually saying, no, we're doing digital marketing, but we don't have a strategy. That's around 58–59%. So quite shocking, but maybe not so shocking if we think that people are on this webinar are likely to want to be developing a strategy. But it's good to see that we have around a quarter, so 24% where it's integrated. You have a digital strategy and it's integrated, and then 17% where it's defined in a separate document. Now this is actually, thanks for voting, by the way. That's useful to see because it compares to similar research we've done with the Technology for Marketing event. We'll be at that show later in the year, and we've actually repeated this research recently. So the way I see it is that for sure it makes sense. There's so much that needs to be done, changes to the organisation for the transformation, that it does make sense to have a digital strategy. But the starting point is a separate transformation plan, really, and then which is the light blue area of the pie, and then the long-term plan would be to make it integrated as part of business as usual, and the digital activities are aligned with what you want to achieve as a business. So what I'll mainly be focusing on in this talk is developing a separate document, but I'll be giving you some ideas on how you can integrate. As well as the vote there, I just wanted to find, just for those of you who say we don't have a strategy, you'll need to work with your colleagues to identify, you'll have to justify why you need a strategy. So I was just hoping you could type in to the chat box some of the reasons why you think it would be a good idea if there's no to have a strategy? What sort of problems might you hit if you don't have a strategy or a long-term plan for digital? So if you could type those into the chat box, please, and we'll just see what you think. Share some of those ideas. Yeah, so I'm seeing, thank you, we've got Carolee Ann's talking about issues with buy-in and getting content. That's one of the structural changes in B2B in particular, to empower your perhaps people involved with product development, to empower them to write because they have the specialist knowledge about the market. You'll never know if you've achieved success, Linda's saying. That's right, and you won't know how to improve. You may be improving leads from online, but actually you're missing out on opportunity because your competitors are growing leads faster. So just taking a look at some of these other ones, we have a strategy, so yeah, there's no board buy-in. That's something we can perhaps look at in terms of the questions at the end. Wasted marketing efficiency, I'm seeing from Anton and Dulmi, no measurable ROI, no key roadmap, no commercial direction. So a lot of obvious things, I think, but we do have to work hard to make the case to our colleagues. And I think one of our resources is called Making the Case for Business Investment in Digital Marketing. And we do recommend doing the sort of benchmarking. So I would say score your performance, and then another thing that I'd recommend is that you create a spreadsheet-based model so that you can see the volume of leads currently based on your visits and how you can grow that, and look at a worst case and a best case. So the worst case would be if there's no investment, but the best case is if you start optimizing how you can grow, improve targeting, how you can improve your lead generation. So I think we saw, I'm not sure actually we saw the targeting one, but this is one I'll be talking about. The online value proposition is your content strategy and how you share that through social media. We had several people mentioning wastage, lots of people mentioning the measurement and optimization side. Not so many talking about the integration, but that's another key challenge, that you've got the sales and marketing team and how they interact in business-to-business marketing is particularly important, and you need to work out that lead qualification and nurture through marketing automation. So thanks very much for those. I'm going to speed up a little as we get into the practical tools now, and then we'll come back for the questions in around half an hour or so. So I mentioned that you need that initial phase of developing a plan. Now people often say, well, if you're creating an annual plan or even a 2 or 3 year plan, how do you keep it agile? Well, the way we recommend you do that is once you've got the KPIs in place, you have 90-day reviews against performance, actual against target, and you're also running continuous tests on the site to increase your lead generation. And I'll show you some examples of those later. So the 5 key areas to look at in planning we recommend is doing the capability review I showed you, but also doing a digital SWOT, which is your strengths and weaknesses for the digital channel and how it integrates. I'll show you that in a moment. We've talked about KPIs and dashboards, but I think also having a long-term vision of how the company will be transformed in the way that lead generation works is really important, to bring all the employees along. We're not touching any more on that today, but we've certainly got resources on the site that help with that. And then you need the roadmap, and we'll look briefly at segmentation and targeting with an example from RS Components. So I think they've got a great layered targeting model. The other good way, or the other useful technique, particularly for business-to-business marketing, is to develop customer personas, which should go across channels and really define for different audience types in the buying unit how your content will support them both in their work and how you'll deliver that content through time. So one of the resources we have on Smart Insights is a persona toolkit. If you Google Smart Insights, you'll see we've also got blog posts around how to develop this with examples. So that's developing the online value proposition. So as well as the RACE planning framework, I wanted to introduce a couple of other frameworks that we have available that will help you. And again, these are all on the blog, but with more detailed examples available for our expert members. And the first one is SOSTAC, which gives you an actual process for developing your plan and then for continuously monitoring and improving. So that's different from RACE, which is more around the actual tactics that you run on the site to improve your interactions with your audiences. What we also have is for strategic, for campaigns that you run through the year, content marketing plans as well. So this is the SOSTAC framework, very widely used and voted by the Chartered Institute of Marketing as one of the most popular planning tools or models. And this is developed not by Smart Insights originally, but one of my co-authors on the Digital Marketing Excellence book, PR Smith, that's Paul Smith. And he developed that originally as a marketing communications strategic framework, and we've applied it here in the books to digital marketing. So you can see one of the beauties of SWOT is it's very of SOSTAC rather. It does start with SWOT, but it's very easy for colleagues to understand. So where are we now? Where do we need to be? How do we get there? What are the main strategic pillars of our digital marketing? And then what's the details of the communications, the media investment, the contact strategy through marketing automation. So that's really everything to the right of situation analysis and tactics is the plan, and then you have the action and control to review the resourcing of that through agencies and doing the research, monitoring the KPIs through analytics. So if you haven't heard of SOSTAC, I'd really recommend looking at the resources on Smart Insights, or Paul's got his own site you can take a look at as well. Now within SOSTAC, we started off with the situation analysis and then going into objective setting and strategy. And what we recommend is to combine those all together, because although we're saying you need a digital marketing plan, if you're creating a 30-page plan, it's unlikely the most senior management review that. For the digital specialists, you may well need a longer plan, but you do need that top-level exec summary. And one of the tools in our digital marketing library, in the strategy toolkit, gives you a Word template and some examples for B2B and B2C of how you can create this. So the idea of this is Word, so you can just amend it. So what I found is efficient when I'm consulting is to develop a plan where in the left column you've got a table looking across the RACE plan, and then to put in specific SMART objectives. So for a consumer site, you might say we're looking to increase visits by 250,000 per month, and then what's the main reason, what's the source, how can we justify that statement? So in this case, we're looking to invest in SEO because we're perhaps limited in that, and we've seen what competitors can do, and we've modelled the performance improvement. So then these are the strategies or the tactics that are used to deliver against that, and then you've got your KPIs in terms of increasing the volume of natural search, and then in the act, this is our lead generation stage. And then as a reminder, the idea is this isn't a static plan. You'll review this every 90 days and you'll update this this plan as you're running the tests on site to boost conversion. The next specific recommendation of how you create the plan is to really take time out to consider how your market has changed with the influence of digital marketing. Now you'll know your traditional competitors, but digital gives you new competitors through search marketing. And it's best to lay those out on a map so you can think what type of sites are these and how can you reach them through paid, owned and earned media. So this is a very good way of looking at how to invest in digital media, where media might be, say, Google AdWords, or this is in this box here, the Google Display Network, MPUs, or digital banners that you might serve in social media, perhaps your video. And then with the owned media, this is more about your social media, your own website and the SEO, and the earned media would be traditional public relations. So hopefully quite a few of you have heard of that paid, owned, earned split, but it's a good way to break it out. And then you think, well, using those media channels here, how can we find ways of interacting with our audience? Now, as you can see, I've chosen this one because it was just a great visual. It's actually a consumer example, but for business to business, this might be quite similar. So it might be, how can we use face-to-face events? How can we use webinars? Are there any ways we can develop a content hub with relevant content for our audience? So I'll show you an example of that content hub idea in a moment. And then you'll know the SWOT analysis, which is usually just 4 boxes. Within the Smart Insights templates, we use what we call a TOWS analysis, where you put the strengths and weaknesses internally at the top, opportunities and threats on the left, and then you combine the two to say, what are our main strengths and opportunity strategy, or weakness and threats. So if we're sort of poor at conversion rate optimization, that might be one of our main strategies that we're going to use in the year ahead. You'll also notice here I've prefixed each of the strengths and weaknesses with RACE, so whether it's an issue around reach or conversion, or G for governance, you know, perhaps there's a resource issue or a brand issue that needs to be managed. So I'd really recommend this TOWS framework because it's forward-looking, whereas traditional SWOTs are more backwards looking. Then bringing that all together in terms of the strategy, I've mentioned the use of personas so that you can tailor your content, putting the goals in place, and then the segmentation, targeting and positioning. And once that's defined, you can really work on the content marketing strategy, develop a content hub to engage your audience and to increase reach. And so just to give you an idea of how powerful this can be, with Smart Insights, in the last year, using search marketing based on our content strategy, we've now grown to a stage where we get over 500,000 visits or sessions on the site every month. So that's more than 1 million page views, and that's really driven our lead growth by getting our content marketing right. Now for us, that's SEO that drives a lot of that improvement. We get about 80% of our visits by SEO because we're experts in that. But social media, I think, in business to business is often a better way in terms of quick wins, because SEO is a sort of long-term play. So those of you who said, well, where should we start? I think my recommendation would be to find the content that works best for you and your audience, develop some really stellar content that stands out in the market, and then use social media to share that through your partners and customers. So in terms of what that content should do, this is what we call in the books online value proposition. It's saying, what can you add to the experience of your audience? So help them do their job, help them progress their career, their professional development, help them look good to colleagues. So the way that we do that on Smart Insights, our stellar content is related to creating a digital marketing plan, because we know that's our core strength, if you like, and we know it's an identified need amongst our audience. So the idea of segmentation and targeting, I wanted to give you a specific example of how you can do this if you're a world or a sector leading company. So this is RS Components, and they presented actually in our conference a couple of years ago the way they do this. So they've got very clear, not a complex segmentation in terms of the relationship with the company, depending on the number of purchases, and then they combine the position in the life cycle with the behavior. So the type of products that have been browsed, they're tracking those on the site. And I've chosen this example because it actually, using their marketing automation system, they're able to use dynamic content to build a very tailored communication, just with quite a small team to do this. So they let the marketing automation system do the work. So you can see here, depending on the way they've assessed the way the person's browsing the site or competing, reviewing the email, they're delivering these hero offers. So this is one here for the customer life cycle. It's a prospect rather than a customer. So they've got 10% off the new order. So everyone can use this form of dynamic content. So a bit of a shocking slide here to just to emphasize the importance of measurement, as many of you already have in your comments. So you do need a dashboard, and I think it needs to be channel-based. For us, it's based around the RACE framework, but just to show you a couple of examples you might want to look at later when you download, if you download the presentation. So this is SAP. They've got something similar to RACE, but they don't actually have the number of leads here because it's more of a public presentation. And then this is an online version for an online B2B SaaS service. Quite interesting because they're actually sharing all this data publicly. If you go and look at the buffer open, that's the social media service. But for smart insights and using Google Analytics, what we recommend is that you tailor according to the RACE planning framework, like so. So you want the visits to the site, but of course you want to increase those to leads and conversion, and that's the most important thing to set up in your Google Analytics. Yet Google Analytics doesn't do that by default, so you do need to add that tracking in. That would be a key takeaway in terms of the measurement. And then this will be your traditional marketing automation or sales system recording the conversion through to sales and the quality of those sales, and then in the longer term, the lifetime value of those sales. So rather than just thinking of the volume of interactions online, do think about the quality and value you're generating as well. And this is a company I've worked with which illustrates this quite nicely. They were able to say for the leads that were generated on their site through this taster, it was actually a consumer business for people. It's a bit like our interactive tool. They were able to work out that when someone does the taster, it's worth £9. So they can then work that through their analytics to see the value. So that's the plan stage, which is the longest section because I did want to race through. So I'm going to go through in the next 5-10 minutes or so quite quickly these other sections. So here we're looking at media effectiveness. We would emphasize search marketing, looking at the opportunity there, then look at your social media and influencer outreach plan, particularly important for B2B to look at who you're going to communicate with. Look at using Google AdWords and paid social media, perhaps on Facebook or LinkedIn, and then put that all together into an acquisition plan and campaign plan. So that question of where do you prioritize, I think it's really useful across your media to say, look at the volume that you're generating now and hope to generate in the future against the quality and the cost. So what we're seeing here is high volume, high quality, and that's really where you should focus your efforts by the 70-20-10 rule. That's where you should be focusing because you're getting the highest return on investment here. So for us, that would be search engine optimization using some targeted Google AdWords. The 20 would be maybe where we're already using LinkedIn and Facebook. The ROI isn't quite there, so we're looking to optimize that. And then 10% would be the new techniques that come out month on month. So Google AdWords have got customer match, for example, you can use to upload your customer list now. That would be the 10% where you're testing. So this is just to show with search marketing, that there are other tools available from AdWords. You can estimate, you can then look at your positioning. This is a B2B example, license dashboard. They want to get visibility for the language that their audience covers. So it's the content marketing that fuels that as well. Now we cover content marketing under ACT because that's what drives lead generation, and it links through to customer journey analysis because you've got to have the right pointers and signposts on the site to point people to the right template. And some of the talks you'll hear on Digital Week later on in the week are about how to personalize to get the right content in front of the right person. But that relies on generating leads, profiling, and then tailoring the message. So then we have the content marketing and optimizing the landing pages, which are so important in business to business, and then putting together that editorial plan. So what we've tried to do is to separate out all of these key activities so that you can work on those, the ones you're not so strong on at the moment, and give more detailed guidance, such as how do you use Google Analytics to work out which pages are generating the leads and to build on those. So we've got time, I think, for one more poll at this point. So we're going to look at optimization and think about, okay, if we haven't done any optimization, where do we start? Should it be the home page? Should it be those landing pages we've talked about, or some other one? So let's have a look to see what the votes we've got there. We're seeing around 2/3 are saying landing pages are most important, and then the home page and product pages. I think that's about right for business to business. I would say you have to look at the footfall in Google Analytics, and often you do get a lot of people by volume on your product and category pages, so it can be worth optimizing those. That's certainly the case for ourselves. But yeah, landing pages are certainly a key area, and I'll just show you some examples in a moment quickly. So one of our templates is all about saying, review some of the techniques that you have now and then try and improve them. If you've got this sort of classic carousel that doesn't really speak the user's language, so you know, what is a SAM portal? Most people wouldn't know. It actually stands for Software Asset Management. What you should be trying to do is to give more just clearer, plain English. So we're going to help you with your license management for your software. That's there's still probably a bit too much jargon here, but clearer calls to action there rather than those carousels that we see on many B2B sites. So we're certainly huge fans of content marketing, and we produce a lot of infographics ourselves to explain the concept. But I'd say don't just develop individual resources on landing pages. You can do that as a starting point, but what you should do is to grow into having a resource center, which is a content hub. So ourselves, HubSpot would be an example of where they've added value to their audience by having a central area for all resources. And then to answer this question, where should you start? What I'd recommend there with your content marketing is that you develop a plan looking at, it's really a content mapping. So map the content marketing across the customer journey from awareness to purchase, and then think, are we mainly doing emotional content or is it mainly rational? So think about, run a workshop, and then to develop content in the areas where you're lacking. I think often in B2B marketing, there's a lot of rational content, but perhaps not the investment in the more emotional triggers, which can work really well in B2B as well. And then it becomes important to test your landing pages. I'm not talking small changes here, just changing button color or headlines, quite dramatic changes. And this one here, just to show you, this is from What Test 1, a huge difference here through this much nicer, simpler design for this B2B provider. But you can't really second guess. You were probably thinking, okay, that's nice and simple, that one would perform better. But I've got a counter example here that shows that the more complex, longer form mobile responsive page does perform a lot better. So the challenger in this case actually worked much better to increase leads. So I do recommend this site, Which Test One, if you're trying to explain to colleagues why you should do this sort of optimization. And we've seen big improvements in Smart Insights using a tool called convert.com, which allows us to run these sort of tests. This was just one test we did. We use a pop-up on the site to encourage people to learn about our resource centre, and through making one small change, which was testimonials, adding that to our pop-up, we increased leads by 10%. So you can see in just a week we were able to work out that we were getting significantly more leads. So across a month, actually hundreds or almost 1,000 more leads from making a small change. So convert within the business-to-business context, it's about using both online communications and using sales-based communications and deciding on those that are most appropriate. And one of the ways we can do this is through lead nurture or remarketing, where we set up an automated welcome sequence. That's what we do on Smart Insights, and then you would tailor the content according to the audience. So one of the things we do is, if you're a marketing manager in a client-side business, you see a different message to if you're working for an agency. As an agency owner, we'll recommend different content based on that. And then we'll also remarket. We'll serve on Google AdWords, Google Display Network, or Facebook or Twitter. We'll serve reminders that people have visited. So remarketing is a very effective business-to-business tactic I'd recommend. Personalizing when people are on the site, that's something we do as well. We'll say recommend content for different audiences. And then you need to look at your sales marketing integration as well. Look at the conversion rate optimization also, if you've got online sales. And then we've called out mobile separately because it is growing importance for B2B, although not as important as B2C now, where it can be more than half of the audiences. So in terms of following up on leads, I think that this is the way we think at Smart Insights, and you don't have the resource to follow up on everyone. So it's really where they're showing, the audience is showing the highest level of interest by the number of times they're accessing your content or the type of content they're using. And then the fit in terms of the size of business or the whether they meet your target audience. So you want to use qualification by the type of content your users have accessed, how they've clicked through on emails, and then follow up by phone or email, depending on the size of company. And then work out triggered emails, how you follow up for different types of content assets being downloaded. That's all your marketing automation. Okay, I've got a couple of B2C examples here about optimizing, just to show what you can do. But I think because of time, it's showing that you can customize in different markets with the right tool. But I've talked a bit about optimization already, so I want to get to your questions. So just to complete the picture then, this is once you have converted customers and how you use them as advocates, how you onboard them using the online help services, give them a great experience, give great quality of customer service, all the good marketing success criteria, but also email marketing and social media to stay in touch with your audiences and help them to become advocates for the business. So on this marketing automation, another simple mind tool I'd recommend that you can use is just do again a gap analysis before or after across the customer life cycle. Where are you using email now, or or personalization on the website against how can you do that in future. So that's the before and the after. And then work that through into new email communications, new content to support those new touch points. So that is our race through race planning. You can see we really believe that you need to go into the details to be successful, because if you don't go into these details and optimize, your competitors will. So drive it by analytics, create models of what the uplift is in spreadsheets, do those capability reviews, develop the strategy so that you can have your pillars for success, create a long-term vision and roadmap, and then really be relentless about driving improvement through the some of the optimizations I've shown. So I hope you found that's useful. It's a lot to take in, but I know everyone on the call is busy, and I want to get across as much as possible, and to give practical tips both for those of you who are new or perhaps more advanced as well. So do get in touch on LinkedIn or follow us on some of the other social channels, but I'm very happy to answer questions there. But I'd like to just answer a few in the time we have remaining. So thanks for listening, and I look forward to the questions.